Great. Can you confirm that you can hear me?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Great. Thank you. Well, thank you very much. Really enjoyed hearing about all of your organizations. Climate and the environment seems to be a really important issue, and really appreciate all the work that you're all doing. Fundraising certainly sounds like a big issue. Kind of makes me feel like that's what this session should have been about, but it is still quite relevant in that respect, and we'll be discussing the various ways in which it can help, co-creation can help you all as far as resource mobilization. So Nassir Katuramu is my name. I am based in Uganda. Currently, I'm calling you from a small town in Germany called Ingelheim. I'm here to attend a convention by one of our partners at Ashoka. I have been working with Ashoka for about 17 or so years in different capacities. For 8 years, I was running the venture program for Ashoka in East Africa, which involves identifying and supporting Ashoka fellows. Within the region of East Africa, I was involved in finding about 80 to 100 Ashoka fellows that I worked with very closely around the East African region, 5 countries. And the goal there was to help them scale their impact across the region and globally. More recently, I've been involved as a freelance consultant with various foundations and still with Ashoka. And I have kind of built an expertise and focus around the topic of strategy, co-creation, and partnerships. And so I work with a lot of non-profit organizations as social enterprises around this topic. So it's about helping them to be clear on their strategy, figure out how best to communicate their strategies, and also how to develop the strategies in a way that will lead them towards sustainability and exponential scale and growth, and investment readiness as well. So it's a real pleasure to be here and to meet with you all. I think I got in touch with I was connected to a nonprofit builder through Seagull Family Foundation, which is a small family foundation in East Africa that I work with, and I support their grantees in East and Southern Africa, again, around the topic of strategy mainly. Yeah, so really glad to be having this conversation on co-creation with you all and partnerships. Just a couple of pointers here before we get started. It would be good if at any point during the presentation, during our discussion, if you have any questions at all, just feel free to put up your hand, and I'll just pause and we can address the question that you have, or you can just type your question into the chat box, and we'll get to that as soon as possible. So this is meant to be, it's a small, intimate group, and so let's have this as an engaging conversation, really, back and forth. And so I'll be pausing at intervals during the presentation just to hear your thoughts and your ideas around specific topics that we'll be covering. So I'm just going to share my screen. Please confirm when you can see it.
Yes, we can.
Okay, very good. And so before we dive in, I just wanted to quickly ask this group, and we can just go around the room, or those that are comfortable sharing. I would just like to ask everybody to share what word comes to mind when you think about co-creation. Yeah. So co-creation is often thought of as a form of partnerships, but many different people think about it in different ways. And so I just wanted to kind of get a sense of what your perspective of co-creation is. What's the first word that comes to mind when you think about co-creation?
It's about alignment of values with your partners to create something mutual beneficial. That's what comes to mind for me.
Yeah, that's excellent. Thank you, Martina. Anybody else?
It's actually it's funny, like I actually think of the opposite when I think of it. For me, I think like plurality of knowledge, like sharing, kind of like almost like conflict in order to progress, like many different perspectives, leading to more nuanced ways of thinking.
Yeah, interesting perspective there. Yeah, thank you, Nicole. Anyone else want to share what comes to mind when you think about co-creation?
Joel, I think, wants to share something. Yeah.
Joel, please, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, something Nicole just said resonated for me. I see that as perhaps the precursor to co-creation. So I sort of thought about co-creation in the stage where it was actually happening. So you've got core teams with a pretty cool, I don't know, team spirit, free to create, rapid cycle prototyping, trying to see what works, what doesn't, that sort of stuff during co-creation phase. But definitely that conflict of different perspectives has to happen before and probably during as well.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Thank you for that, Joel. Any other thoughts?
It is in relation to partnerships, right? Because see, for me, the meaning is different depending on what you apply it to, because fundraising is a different application to partnerships, to social, to business. So I'm reading it that it's a business co-creation for a partnership. Correct?
Yes, and yeah, no, you're very right, Martina. It's definitely applicable in different contexts, and so the definition will change slightly, but the principles are the same, really. In the end, it's when different parties come together, and the reason why the different parties are coming together is exactly for the reasons that Nicole and Joel have shared, because they're coming in to capture the value from the diversity that they represent, right? So the difference in resources, the difference in capabilities is what makes co-creation relevant. And then once you've recognized that difference, then there's the need for alignment, which is what you said, Martina, right? Because in the end, you need to be able to cut through the differences to figure out common ground that will make it possible for the partners to work together. So we're going to get deeper into that and how it works. But thank you so much for sharing your thoughts on this subject. All right, so let's dive in here. So we're talking about social and business co-creation in particular. And it's important to understand that co-creation as a concept can be applied in so many different contexts, right? So you could talk about co-creation in the context of a single company and different departments co-creating. You could think about co-creation in the context of a team of teams structure, where you have different organizations or units or groups of people coming together to co-create and work together around a shared goal. You could talk about co-creation in the context of an organization and its beneficiaries or its users or its customers coming together to co-create a value that's mutually beneficial. In this case, we are talking about co-creation between businesses and non-profits. So it's a very specific context that we're going to be covering here. And the reason why we chose this context is because we're trying to talk about co-creation to the extent that it's able to facilitate scale. So as a non-profit organization that is looking to scale, co-creating with business entities presents itself as an approach that you could explore that can help to facilitate your scale a lot more rapidly than other approaches. And so that's what we're going to be exploring today, the value and the how-tos related to co-creation between business and nonprofits. So our objectives for the session today is defining co-creation, understanding what shared value means, because ultimately that's what co-creation is all about. It's about creating shared value. It's about creating a win-win scenario for all the parties involved. Understanding why it matters to business and nonprofits. So I'll be sharing with you some research data where we talk to a number of businesses and nonprofits to really understand why co-creation and working across sectors is something that's important for them. We'll be looking at some real life examples of co-creation between businesses and nonprofits to see how those worked out and how they went about making that happen. And then finally, we'll look at some steps that based on the research that we've done at Ashoka over a number of years, some steps that we've established as really important on your journey towards co-creation as a nonprofit or as a business. So that's going to form the scope of our discussion today. So to start us off, let's start by exploring this topic of co-creation and what it means. So just to build on what you've all shared already. So a couple of points. Co-creation really can be thought of as collaboration to produce or to create value for stakeholders that are involved in the partnership. So there's alignment that is needed in order for this value to be created. But of course, the stakeholders have to be coming from a place where they are all bringing something unique to the table. So that diversity that you referred to earlier is almost it's an important ingredient towards successful co-creation. So collaborative development of value between stakeholders. Now, as I already said, when you talk about stakeholders, that could be thought of in many different contexts. So it could be customers and the company that serves them. It could be beneficiaries and the nonprofit that serves them, or users and the organization that serves them. It could be different companies coming together to co-create. It could be companies and nonprofits coming together to co-create. So think of the word stakeholders in a loose sense, and it could be applied in many different contexts. Central to co-creation is this idea of sharing resources, right? And so it kind of it introduces a sort of different way of thinking about partnerships, particularly in the nonprofit context. Many times when nonprofits are partnering with organizations, the nonprofit typically will take on the position of a beneficiary, right? That is benefiting from resources or funds or whatever value that might be coming to them to help or enable them to do the work that they need to do. Co-creation gets away from that, and it kind of redefines the partnership in a way that you have value that's flowing in both directions. So the nonprofit is coming with value to the table and exchanging that value with the partner for whatever it is that they get in return. And in the end, the partner is benefiting on a strategic level the same way that the nonprofit is benefiting on a strategic level. So it's really important to see this as exchange of value across stakeholders. And when we talk about value, this is quite relative to the needs of the stakeholders, right? Again, so depending on who the stakeholders are, value will mean different things. And we'll look at some examples of what that means in the context of business, nonprofits, and society. And there's this concept called shared value. And shared value really is when you get to a place where, as a result of the co-creation effort, the benefits or the value that's being created for all the stakeholders represents a win-win situation. Everybody feels like they are winning in the partnership. So, and this is a really important aspect of what co-creation means. It's really about an equally yoked relationship where each of the stakeholders is not only bringing assets and resources and value to the table, but they're also taking value that is important and relevant to them on a strategic level. So it's win-win in that sense, and there's nobody that's net beneficiary or net benefactor. Everybody is a beneficiary and everybody is a benefactor, sort of in an equal and an equally strategic way. So in the context of business and nonprofits, you could think of one way to define co-creation might be to think about it as, arriving at a place where you're able to link economic value that's being created for the business and societal progress, which is obviously the value for the nonprofit. So if you're able to link those two things, then you've arrived, you've reached a state of sort of shared value. But as I said, value could mean many different things, and it's important to kind of unpack what we mean by economic value, societal progress. What does this actually mean? Because it could mean different things for many different organizations. So to kind of help us think about what the various, manifestations of value could be, here are a couple of points. Again, this has come from conversations that we have had with nonprofits and businesses alike. And of course, as a shocker, ultimately, it's an NGO and we exist to serve society. And so we are intimately aware of the various needs in society that we're trying to, that nonprofits and businesses are trying to address through their products and services and offerings. So for the businesses, some of the things that will represent value, things that are strategically important for them, the things that they would be looking for in a partnership, right? So if you're thinking co-creation, it's about win-win. So the question is, is the business able to get one or more of these things out of that partnership so that this can be a relationship that they look at as a strategically important relationship? So, growth in revenue is always a priority for business. Access to innovation is another, access to new markets, employee engagement, and anything that can help to drive productivity in the business. Brand image, a positive brand image. Access to unique expertise that they may not have, particularly from a local context, and in as far as access to and engaging with local communities is concerned. CSR positioning. So these are all the various things that represent value for a business entity. And so in a co-creation partnership, as a non-profit that's looking to co-create with a business, the non-profit needs to be able to demonstrate that it can deliver for the business one of these things, one or more of these things. This is what will make that partnership something that's kind of leaning more towards co-creation than your traditional partnership. On the side of non-profits, what are the things that are that represent value? So you've got scale of impact, right? So you've all said you need to scale. That is something that it's keeping you all awake, or at least keeping a good number of you guys awake. Access to resources, right? Financial resources in particular. Access to unique skills and expertise. Access to technology, visibility, and access to networks that you'd otherwise not have access to, or to places and people of influence that you'd not have access to otherwise. And so these are some of the things that represent value for nonprofits. And so ultimately, in a co-creation partnership, the main goal is to ensure that while the business is benefiting in one way, the nonprofit is also benefiting in the way that's relevant for them. And so there's got to be that two-way flow of value. And at the center, we have society. And society is an interesting group here, or an interesting stakeholder group, because society on the one hand represents customers for businesses. But at the same time, it represents the beneficiaries or user groups that are being served by the nonprofits. And so it's important, usually it's important during a co-creation process that both parties or the entities involved in the co-creation, they're absolutely clear about which group they are both trying to serve, right? And they have to be aligned on why that group is important, what it is that group needs. And so while the business is able to advance in its economic progress or its economic ambitions by serving that same group, that same group is also benefiting from a social standpoint from the things that the NGO is actually doing. And so being aligned around who the target group, what group that is, and what their needs are is really important. So typically from a societal standpoint, shelter, food, water, health, education, employment, human rights, these are things that typically, and these are not exhaustive lists, right? So there may be some things that are not listed on here, but just as examples, these are some of the things that are important to society, things that society is grappling with all the time. And so non-profits are usually focused on delivering these services and creating access to these basic needs to society. Businesses, on the other hand, will typically not, will only think about these things to the extent that it translates into revenue for them, to the extent that it translates into economic growth for them. But there's a place where the three can come together in such a way that everybody is winning. Society is having its social needs met. It's having access to the products and services that it needs. The companies or the businesses are making money, and the nonprofits are able to achieve their mandate from a social impact standpoint. So that's kind of where that middle is where you're trying to reach when you're looking at co-creation between businesses and for-profits. So let's look at what that might look like in practice, right? So when you're trying to create shared value, right, you're really trying to bring these three different stakeholder groups together, and the relationships between them ultimately should aim at getting you to a place where it's a win-win-win, right? So you have the business winning, you have the nonprofits winning, and you have society winning. Ultimately, this is the nirvana, so to speak, of shared value. This is what it is that you're striving towards. So between the businesses and nonprofits, what's happening in practice? What's happening on a practical level? What's happening there is assuming that there's alignment, right? There's alignment about who is the target group, assuming that there's alignment there's alignment at the level of like values, mission, and vision, meaning that in terms of identity and let's say the principles that drive the organizations, assuming that there's alignment there already, on a practical level, what's happening between the business and nonprofits is resources are being shared, right? Resources are flowing back and forth. You also have a sense of shared responsibility between the nonprofits and the businesses, right? They see themselves as partners in trying to deliver or to create value for a particular target group. And so it's really, really important to approach or to think about co-creation in that sense, which is, as a nonprofit, I am coming to the table to partner with a business entity, and together we are creating value that's going to change the lives or serve a particular group in a certain way. But in doing that, our strategic needs as a business will be met. And in doing that, the strategic needs of the nonprofit will be met. And the net winner or the overall winner is going to be society or the target group that will benefit from both of those service providers. Between the nonprofits and society, typically the flow of value is, it's social programs, it's impact, right? That's flowing from the nonprofit to society. So this is typically the sort of relationship that you have between the nonprofits and society, and between business and society, it's the products and services that the business is producing and delivering to society. So in the end, society benefits when business and nonprofits come together, right? Because then they are able to have all of their social needs met, but they're also able to access all the products and services that they need. But this should not happen at the expense of either the nonprofits or the businesses. If there's co-creation taking place where there are shared resources and responsibility between the business and nonprofits, then products and services, social programs will flow down to society, but at the same time, the nonprofits and the businesses will be able to leverage each other to do the work that they're doing individually on a much, much higher scale. They'll be able to do so on a grander scale because of the partnership between them, right? So it's a situation of like the whole being greater than the sum of the parts, sort of resulting from this sort of situation. So seeing this link is something that is really important at the very start of the co-creation exercise. There has got to be clarity on how these three things come together and how the different parts of this, how these three relationships will come together in a win-win-win situation. This is what shared value is. So before I move on to share some research, just to sort of answer the question as to why this matters, right? And why do we feel so strongly about co-creation as an approach to partnerships and an approach to scale and impact? We have talked to different companies and CSOs about this, and from their perspective, I'm going to share some. I'm going to be sharing what they are talking about. But I'll just pause here for a second and see if there are any questions at this point from what I have covered so far. Before we go further, are there any questions? I think there might be some in the, just looking at the chat box, I wonder if there are any questions in here. Nope, none in the chat box. Does anybody have any questions, or shall we just power along? All right. No question.
Sorry. I think I have a question. I'm sorry if you mentioned this already, but you just mentioned that society benefits when business and nonprofits come together, but none of the actors should be compromised. And I wonder if this is something very ideal or something it actually can be reached. I mean, the part where none of them, should be compromised.
Mm-hmm. That's a really good question. The fact is it can be reached, and I'll actually share with you some examples of how this has played out, right? I think it's just a question of being open-minded to it. It is something that is easy to resist because it's not easy to see how that works, but with some examples and case studies, real life examples and case studies, you will see that it is possible for this to happen. It's just really about understanding what the value is that each of the parties is looking for and being able to structure the partnership in a way that delivers that value. Yeah. Any other questions? Okay, good. So I guess we can go on. So this is a poll that was done by Ashoka and some partners some years back. This is in 2016, and there's actually a report, if you look for it on the internet, called the Social Entrepreneurship Barometer. And we're asking CSOs and social entrepreneurs questions that would help us understand what it is that incentivizes co-creation for them. What is it that would motivate them to get into a co-creation relationship with a for-profit, or what it is that would drive them to want to work with either companies or public institutions in basically working across sectors. What is it that they are looking for or incentivizes their work with other organizations in other sectors, in the private or the public sector? And so a couple of questions here, and of course this is an excerpt, just a couple of points from a much bigger report. What does the social entrepreneurship ecosystem need to develop for greater impact, right? So what do they need? So already what you mentioned is reflected here. So financial means is the first thing. A lot of the nonprofits will say the thing that stresses us the most, the thing that keeps us awake at night, is financial sustainability. That's for sure. But partnerships with companies is another thing that came up quite strongly amongst the CSOs that were polled. Partnerships with companies is something that came up as something that they see as an important ingredient towards their ability to grow in their impact, recognition from public authorities, and so on and so forth. But the important thing here really is to see just how high up the partnerships with companies and the private sector came up as something that's really important in the ability of nonprofits to scale and to grow their impact. The other question was, what would you expect from a collaboration with either a company or a public institution? So now that we've established partnerships with companies is important, what is it that you expect, right? And so the answer at the top was increased outlets for your products and services. So they see, NGOs see for-profit entities, especially well-established multinational, large for-profit entities. They see those as kind of a distribution channel for the services. They see that as an access point to markets or to communities or to countries that they would otherwise not have the resources and ability to get into as quickly as they would like. And so for-profit see partnerships with these businesses as a way to access and reach places that they would otherwise not be able to reach quite quickly. Shared conception of new products and services. So again, nonprofits see private entities as incredibly innovative, and they see them as a partner that can help them to think and co-create or to reimagine the way that the products or the services or the programs that they're delivering could look like. Financial support came in at a close number 3, and then the rest, as you can see, their skills transfer and so on and so forth. So these are some of the questions. These are some of the answers that we got from the CSOs. But we also talked to the companies themselves, right, to understand what it is that what it is that motivates companies to engage in co-creation across sectors, and in particular with nonprofits. And very interestingly, at the very top, the companies say that they're doing it in response to customer expectations, which means that this is no longer for-profit entities. This is no longer sort of an option. It is not something that is kind of a nice to have. It is something that they're doing as a matter of business survival. The customers expect them to invest in them on a social level, and they are voting with their dollars. And so for a company that is looking to be sustainable, that a company is looking to maintain its grip on its customers or to not lose market share, they have to be seen to be investing in the customers that are responsible for the business that they have. And so this was a really interesting insight, and it kind of tells you what it is that incentivizes businesses. And this also really helps to give confidence to nonprofits when they approach for-profit entities around the topic of co-creation, because it's not really an option for the for-profits anymore. It is something they have to do. And you can see it in, sort of in reports that come out from corporations nowadays. Many are, really trying hard to align themselves with 1 or 2 or 3 SDGs to show that whatever the business is that they are doing is actually contributing to solving a societal problem in some way, because that has become a basic expectation in the marketplace, because customers, they have so many options, and so they are able to choose and invest in companies or buy products and services from companies that they believe care and that are investing in them on a social level. The other drivers for companies are responsible image. So this is a very, this is a corporate thing, which is not surprising at all. They want to be seen a certain way. They want to be seen as a sustainable company, a responsible company, a socially conscious company. And so they will work with nonprofits and work with public sector organizations because it fits into this image of a responsible entity that they want to have. And then third is sustaining the business. So very closely connected to point number 1, right? It's a matter of business survival. If you're not investing on a social level in the customers on which you're thriving as a business, you're going to lose them. And so business sustenance demands that businesses are investing on a social level in the customers that they serve. And then the final point here is engaging employees, right? So finding good employees, keeping good employees, in many cases, is more than just a question of how much you're paying them. Being able to create opportunities for the employees to find meaning in their work, for them to feel like they are contributing in a positive way to transforming or changing society, is something that helps to keep employees longer. It is something that helps to engage and make employees happier at the workplace. And so partnerships with nonprofits normally has the potential to create opportunities for employees in the private sector organization to provide or to donate their time or to engage on a pro bono basis with the nonprofits. Whether it's they'll volunteer, they'll provide expertise, they'll do some work in support of the nonprofit, which in turn helps to keep them more engaged in the company. So those are just some points that kind of help to highlight what the motivations and the incentives are for private entities when it comes to co-creation and working across sectors with the nonprofits.
Yeah, just one question, Nassir. Dara is asking just to remind what first, second, and third at the bottom of the scheme, what do they stand for? Yeah, exactly this. Yeah.
Right. So first, second, and third. So these are different categories of companies. So there were different categories of companies that we're talking to. So there was a first category of companies that was, there were various metrics that were looked at to categorize them into first, second, and third tier companies. And so we're trying to find data across the board to see if, depending on where you fall in the tiers, and this might be in terms of size, number of employees, and so on and so forth, if the responses changed. And so you're able to see in the first tier, 22% of the companies said that, or 23% of the companies said the other in the second tier, and in the third tier, 15% of the companies said the other. So that's kind of how they were categorized. But you'd have to look at the detailed report to actually see how the categorizations were done. But it was really just a way of clustering the companies depending on different metrics. All right, so let's now move into the various examples of co-creation between social and business in action. So hopefully through this, Dara, you'll be able to see, and everybody else, it's actually possible to align across strategic needs of nonprofits and for-profits in a way that really does create a win-win-win situation where everybody is happy and everybody is a winner at the end of the day. So these examples, and we have documented these examples between Ashoka Fellows. Many Ashoka Fellows run non-profit entities. There are some social enterprises within the Ashoka Fellowship network globally, but these examples were specifically between the non-profit Ashoka Fellows partnering with for-profit entities from around the world. So these are just two examples, but we'll be sharing with you a document with many more case studies that you can look at after this session to kind of get deeper into how this works and looking at a few other examples. So here is an example between a partnership between a bank and a non-profit entity, and the goal of the partnership was really to drive financial security on both sides. So let's get into the details of the partnership. So you have a bank, right? So the bank, so the Post Bank right here, has a problem of clients that are over-indebted and them having to foreclose on a lot of the loans and a lot of the debt that they have on their books, right? Which costs them a lot of money. And being able to go out and try to recover the money or debt from a client that is unable to pay costs the bank a lot of money, because then they have to take the property, the security, they have to sell it off. It just takes a lot of time, it takes a lot of money, and ultimately it is not a net positive for the bank. So this is a problem that the bank has. On the other hand, you have an NGO, Cresas, that works with people that are vulnerable to financial crisis. And the work that Cresas was doing was particularly relevant in 2007, 2008, when there was the credit crunch, when you had the financial crisis around the world. And so you have a lot of people that were really vulnerable during that time because they were over-indebted, because they were in a situation where they were unable to meet their obligations to the bank. And that put them and their families at a high risk of losing everything. And so as an NGO, they determined that, you know, it was important for people that were at risk of becoming over-indebted, or people that were at risk of falling into a financial crisis. It was important for them to be educated and to be supported with basic financial literacy education and financial planning tools, so that they are they're put in a place where they are in control of their financial position, so as to avoid falling into some state of crisis. So that's the social mission of the NGO, right? That's the target group, that's the group that they work with, that's their mandate, to really help people with the resources, the training, the capacity building that will help prevent them from falling into a crisis. That's the mission of the nonprofit. On the other hand, the bank in its day-to-day activities is having to deal with foreclosures and having to recover loans that are unpaid by their clients. So you see, what's happening here is that you have two organizations across sectors. One is nonprofit, one is private sector. They both have unique problems, but there's a place for them to come together and figure out how to solve both of those problems in a win-win situation, ultimately with the target group, which is these people that are vulnerable to financial crisis benefiting. So they came together, the bank and the nonprofit, they came together. The nonprofit is an Ashoka Fellow organization, so they come together. And in their discussions, they realize that, okay, if we work together, right, and work together to deliver, I first of all identify within the clientele of the bank all those clients that have been red flagged, the ones that are heading towards a certain financial crisis. They are heading towards an inevitable place where they are going to have to be foreclosed, or they are going to have to, the bank is going to need to go and try to recover whatever it is that was lent to them. So once those clients have been identified, the two came together and decided they are going to run jointly a capacity building program. The NGO has got the curriculum, it has got the expertise and the ability to do the training, to provide mentorship and coaching support to these individuals so that they can start to take steps that might turn around their financial situation, put them at a place where they are able to either pay back the loans, or put them at a place where they are able to renegotiate those loans, or they are able to do something that might make it easier and help prevent them from falling into a crisis. So the two organizations come together and they run this program for the clients of the bank. And it's a beautiful co-creation, because in the end, you see the benefit that is created on both sides. For the NGO, they are able to prevent a good number of households and individuals from falling into a state of crisis. They're able to reach quite a number of them through the training, right? And in the end, they were able to avert up to 98% of cases that would have ended up in foreclosures. So that was a huge success rate for the NGO. But at the same time, the bank was able to reduce dramatically the number of non-performing loans that they had on their books. And they were also able to save quite a lot of money that would otherwise have been spent in trying to recover these loans, right? And in addition to that, they were able to benefit from a very positive image that came from this program, because now the clients of the bank are, the perception they get is this bank actually cares about us. This bank actually is investing in helping to make the quality of their lives better. But who's the ultimate beneficiary coming out of this? It is those individuals that are benefiting from the training, the individuals that would otherwise suffer from the financial crisis that would otherwise have come out of this situation. So as you can see, that is a perfect co-creation in the sense that everybody is winning. And it's not a situation where you have the NGO as a net beneficiary from the bank and the bank as a net benefactor. You have value flowing in both directions. The NGO is coming in with resources, assets, capabilities that the bank does not have. At the same time, the bank is coming in with capabilities that the NGO does not have. They have the names and the contacts and visibility of all these individuals that are at risk or vulnerable to falling into a financial crisis. So that is something the NGO does not have. The bank brings that on board. The bank gives access and a platform to access and engage with these clients and to be able to serve them in a way that averts a number of crises. So that's one example of a co-creation in action. Society benefits, the private sector organization benefits, and the NGO benefits. Here is a second example between a software company and an NGO. So again, just to think about what it is that motivated or incentivized this partnership. So you have the NGO, which specializes in working with, specializing with people on the spectrum, right, on the autism spectrum. So this is what the NGO does. It works with people on the autism spectrum, and its mission is to create access to employment opportunities for people that are on the autism spectrum. So they recognize that it is difficult for individuals on the spectrum to find jobs. It's also difficult for employers to create an environment that is conducive for people that are on the spectrum. And so this is what the mission of the NGO is. Now their problem is they are an NGO and they cannot provide the jobs, right? However, they know who the people with the autism are, and they know how to create and to facilitate the, an environment that is conducive for people with autism to actually thrive and to be productive. So this is the NGO, and this is what they do. This is what they're good at. But at the same time, you have a software company, SAP, and they're struggling with one particular problem, which is huge turnover, right? So there's a huge cutthroat competition between software companies to attract the best talent. And it's a question of dangling a higher pay and a higher package, and usually you're going to have these young people running from job to job to job to job because they are trying to find the next best thing. So this is a situation in the software development, in the software industry, and it is one that SAP is suffering from. So they have a huge turnover rate. They are unable to hold on to their best staff. And on the other side, you have an NGO that's working with people on the autism spectrum. Now, between the NGO and the company, they recognize something really special about individuals on the spectrum. They are able to really focus. First of all, they're really smart, and they are able to apply their skills to software development. So that's one thing. The other thing also is that they are not attracted or motivated by the same things that people who are not on the spectrum are. So it's not quite as easy for them to jump from job to job to job to job, because of the circumstances surrounding their condition, but also simply because they're not motivated by the same things. They tend to be really focused and fully immersed in the job that they're doing. And it's almost like a tunnel vision that they have around that particular area, and they do very, very well. So while it's a challenging situation, both the NGO and the company recognized that there was an opportunity to leverage that. There was an opportunity to create jobs for these individuals and to create an environment for them to thrive, and it would solve the problem for the software company, because then it wouldn't have to deal with the same issue of a high turnover rate. And so the two of them came together. And when they came together, what they basically decided was, all right, we're going to run a program that involves the NGO identifying, recruiting, training, and preparing individuals that match what the software company is looking for on the spectrum. Identify them, train them, and prepare them to join the company. The company would open up job opportunities. So they opened up a number of job opportunities and made those available to these individuals. The NGO supported the company to adjust its policies and to create an environment in the corporate space that was conducive for the individuals with autism. And in the end, so many jobs were created for the individuals with on the spectrum. As of 2013, when this survey was done, they had, in a very short period of time, created 94 jobs in the space of just 1 year, gotten them into SAP. Those individuals, many of them are still there to date. They have maintained those jobs. They have never left. And so the turnover rate that the company SAP was experiencing was dramatically reduced. But at the same time, these individuals are incredibly talented. And so the level of productivity and just what they're putting out in terms of product development for SAP skyrocketed. And so SAP was able to benefit in multiple ways from this partnership. Again, you can see, like the previous example, it's really value flowing in both directions. You don't have a net beneficiary and net benefactor between the NGO and the company. The only individuals here that so you don't have a net benefactor or a net beneficiary. You have value flowing in both directions, and you also have society, in this case, these individuals with autism who are benefiting from this, but even they are offering value back in their productivity and their skills to the company. So everybody's contributing, everybody's benefiting. So this is what win-win-win means. So this is another example. These are just two examples that I shared to help demonstrate how a co-creation partnership between a business and the non-profit could potentially work. Yeah, I'll just pause there for a bit and see if you have any questions before we continue on with the discussion. Okay. All right, if there are no questions, then we can proceed. Of course, co-creation does not come without challenges. And so we'll just go very quickly through some of the challenges that you might face when trying to co-create. So one is attitudes to risk, right? Attitudes to risk between the companies and the for-profits. It might be that the company that you're trying to co-create with is a lot larger than you as a non-profit. And this typically is the situation where you have a smaller non-profit that is trying to engage and co-create with a much, much bigger multinational corporation. And so what you have there is that the smaller non-profit is because it's young, or rather it is smaller, it's more nimble, they're able to take more risk, able to innovate. But the large multinational organization is a bit more risk averse because they're so big and the decision-making process is quite bureaucratic and lengthy. And so that can pose a challenge, but certainly not a challenge that cannot be surmounted. Policy and legal restrictions, depending on the countries and the contexts of the organizations, can pose a challenge. Limited or lack of funding for innovation and long-term sustainability can definitely be a challenge because, as you can clearly see in those two examples, those were not short-term partnerships. Those are partnerships that are ongoing and they have gone on for years. Because as you can see, the problems that are being solved are not short-term problems. they are long-term ongoing problems. That's the reason why each of those organizations exists. Whatever the value is that's coming out of the co-creation is feeding directly into the mission and the strategic objectives of the organizations involved. And so those are long-term partnerships. And so if there is no commitment to fund and to sustain those partnerships by both the organizations, that can become a challenge. Operational skills or competency gaps can become a bit of a problem. So these all fall under what we call institutional challenges. But on the other side, you have relational challenges, right? Difference in culture, values between the organizations can often be a challenge. Business and NGOs don't think alike. The motivations for the decisions that they make and the considerations that influence their decisions can be different. And so that could be a challenge. But if there's openness to learn, then this can be surmounted. Misalignment of strategic priorities. What's important? What does success look like? Lack of buy-in across the organization. Often co-creation will work when and if you have buy-in across the board, and in particular at the leadership level. If you don't have buy-in all the way up to the top, you're going to run into problems. Why? Because these are long-term partnerships that require resource allocation. And if you do not have alignment and buy-in from the leadership and across the board, then you're always going to have this friction, particularly when it comes to times when resources need to be allocated towards a partnership. Short-term mindsets, that is something, again, that is obviously a problem when you're looking at a long-term partnership. Then a lack of win-win value exchange, not thinking deeply about what that two-way transfer of value is going to be between the partnerships is going to be a problem. But this obviously is something that co-creation solves, because co-creation is, you're going to be very intentional about ensuring that you're able to see what the value is that's going to flow in both directions. But if you don't do that, then it becomes a bit of a problem. Of course, there are things that you can do to address these challenges. Many of them are going to be direct responses to what we have just discussed here. So alignment around your values and your strategy is a very, very important foundational step in the co-creation process. Leadership focus on collective power over individual strength. So there has got to be an awareness and a recognition of the value of co-creation in order for it to actually materialize and for it to deliver the value that it has the potential to deliver. And so leadership needs to be of a different school of thought, that it's better to work together than to work alone, right? So that's really important. To have a conscious effort in understanding and exchanging between cultures. So understanding and knowing that we are different, we think differently, recognizing that, and being open to what that means in terms of the cultural exchange between the two, doing things differently, making decisions differently, and not seeing that as a barrier, right? So that has got to be something that the organizations are conscious about and deliberate about. Having the internal capacity to contribute. So, having the right systems and processes, having the right skills, the right competencies, it's really, really important in your ability as a non-profit to be able to contribute value to the table. If you don't have the internal capacity to create and contribute value, then you're going in as a beneficiary, you're going in to ask for support as opposed to going in to co-create. You get what I mean? It's a very, very different dynamic. And so in order to co-create, you need to go into the conversation and be able to confidently offer something in exchange for what it is that you're looking for, as opposed to going in and asking for support without necessarily offering up anything. Yep, Julia, I see your hand up. Please go ahead.
Yeah, I was wondering if you've seen examples of this type of alignment working like at earlier stages. Like I have the feeling a bit that unless you're already a very established organization, everything is already sort of like figured out for many of the things that you've been saying, both in terms of, internal capacity to contribute towards the shared value creation, like having the, the sort of long-term thinking. A lot of NGOs don't have the luxury of having that sort of long-term thinking in terms of a program like this, just because of the financial instability, et cetera, that we've been talking about. So again, we're back at the chicken and egg. So I was just wondering if if you come across examples where this has worked at an earlier stage, like I see that, for example, inside our own organization, some programs are more developed than others. And when the program is more developed, then you may have something more tangible to offer, to bring to the table. Whereas when you're in an earlier stage, all you have is potential. But that very often will come across as, initially you have to support me, but this is going to benefit you eventually. But like that is a lot more difficult to sell than saying, I already do this, for example, but I do it differently, and we can both benefit from like an exchange of knowledge means. So I was just wondering if you had any examples.
Yeah, no, that's a really good question, and the answer to that is you need to be able to bring value to the table in order to co-create, which also means that co-creation is not always the only way for you to partner and to engage. It is totally fine for you to go in and seek support. You're not in that instance trying to co-create. You're simply saying, help me out, right? Like, I need support to do X, Y, Z. And I'm not promising that I'm necessarily bringing any value to the table. But if you believe in what I believe in and you think what we're doing is good, please support us for now. And when you get to the point, when you're in a position to co-create, meaning you're able to bring value to the table, then the conversation changes. And so it's totally fine to kind of think about this as sort of a stage that you can work towards as a young organization, and just to be mindful of that. Ultimately, it's always a lot better for you to be in a position where you can co-create than for you to be in a position where you are a net beneficiary that is just seeking support. And so that is something that as a nonprofit, you can aspire to get to. But it doesn't mean that it's the only option available to you, right? So yeah, I hope that answers your question. If you can't offer value, then co-creation is not the approach that you need to be seeking. And there's no need to force it. But you can certainly work towards it, knowing that it's important for you to create and add value to the table. All right, so a few other points here. Clarity on needs and offers on a strategic level. So again, this goes to the point that you just brought up, Julia, just understanding what the strategic needs are of the partner that you're looking to co-create with and being in a position to offer value in that regard. Open access means, again, just removing all the barriers of access. It's important for you to have buy-in in the organization across the board, from the bottom to the top. And there has got to be open access, meaning that it needs to be possible for the organizations to talk with one another at all levels, where it's not a situation of, the CEO is up here, but you can't really access the CEO, you can't meet with the CEO. It needs to be, you need an appointment that is set 3 months in advance for you to talk to the CEO. Like, that kind of dynamic is very, very negative for co-creation. And so open access is really what you need in order for co-creation to work successfully, meaning that there's a recognition by both organizations at all levels, including leadership, that it takes being able to talk to one another freely and openly to make decisions in order for co-creation to actually work. Having a win-win mindset, as I already said, having a sense of both shared responsibility and credit, right? So when you're co-creating, you're working together to create value for a group of beneficiaries or a target group. And so there's a shared responsibility between the parties involved, but there's also shared credit. Ultimately, the success that is realized is the responsibility or the result of both organizations working together. So there's shared credit and shared responsibility. Agility goes without saying, because you're working together on a long-term basis around, to create new value. You're going to make mistakes. Some things will work, some things will not work. And so being open to making mistakes, learning from them, pivoting together is really, really important. And to be able to do so quickly is very important. Long-term mindedness, focus on execution and funding, it goes without saying that those are really important aspects of successful co-creation. So I'm just looking at the time here. We have about 15 minutes left. Is that correct, Anna?
Yes, absolutely correct, yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I had planned for us to have a short break at this point, but I'm not sure if that's a good idea, seeing as we have just 15 minutes left. Should we just run through the rest of the of the session. Yeah?
Yes, please.
Okay, great. Okay, so let's look at the steps to successful co-creation. So I'll just go through these very quickly. So it can often seem like a maze, right? But there are steps that you can take that will kind of make this logical and systematic for your organization. And so I'll just go over these steps very quickly and some questions that you need to think about at each step that are really vital to your success when you're co-creating. So there are 6 key steps, right? So step number 1 is evaluating your readiness to co-create. So as you already pointed out, co-creation is not for everyone. You have to be ready to co-create. You have to be in a position where you're able to co-create. So you have to establish that before you even consider co-creation as an option for you. So that's step number 1. Step number 2 is you need to be able to identify needs on both sides. What are your needs on a strategic level? What are the needs of your potential co-creation partner on a strategic level? Because ultimately co-creation makes the most sense if it's able to create value on a strategic level for all the parties involved. So you must take the time to think about what those needs are. And then number 3 is identifying the right partner, right? Not every partner, just the same way that co-creation will not always be the right approach for you. Not every partner would be the right co-creation partner for you. And so there are certain questions that you have to reflect on that will help you to identify whether or not whichever partner you have in mind is a good or a not so good co-creation partner. And then making connections. What is the right way to go about doing this, right? Are there some approaches or some things you need to keep in mind that will help to tilt the odds in your favor? Because remember, you're the one that's proposing a potential co-creation to a partner, and so you have to approach that conversation the right way. So when we talk about making connections, there's some do's and don'ts that you need to be aware of that will help to increase your chances of success. And then ultimately, once those connections have been made and once there is sort of acceptance, so shall I say buy-in from the partners, then we get into the co-creation actually starts. And co-creation involves co-designing the project to start with, right? So coming together with your potential partner who's bought your idea and working together to figure out what are the steps that we're going to be taking, what are the timelines, what does success look like, XYZ. Doing that together is the first step of co-creation, the actual co-creation. And then, of course, once that has been done, there's the co-execution, co-management, co-evaluation, right? So everything is being done together in order to keep this project going and in order for you to keep realizing the gains that are valuable on both sides. So let's look at each of these steps in a bit more detail to look at some of the key questions that you need to be thinking about. And one of the documents that we'll be sending to you after the session is actually a toolkit, a creation toolkit that we have designed and put together that goes into a lot more detail as far as these steps are concerned. So we'll be giving that to you as a follow-up document. So in evaluating readiness, what are some of the key questions that you want to be thinking about? So 1, are you aware of the implications and the challenges of co-creation, right? So co-creation is not always easy. It takes a lot of time, energy, and investment to make it actually work. You need to be able to bring value to the table. So are you aware of those implications and are you ready for them? Are you also aware of your own limitations and your own strengths? Are you aware of what it is that you can bring to the table? Are you aware of some of the gaps and limitations that you have that perhaps might be addressed through co-creation? That self-awareness is really, really important when you're coming to a co-creation discussion, because it's a conversation about exchange of value. And so if you're not self-aware, then you may not be able to constructively have this discussion with a potential partner. Are you clear on what you're looking for in a co-creation partner and why you need them? Do you have the right systems and processes and resources for co-creation? Do you have the time and the patience for co-creation? Is this the most appropriate collaboration model for you? As we said, co-creation is not for everybody. It's an approach that is incredibly valuable, but because of the need for this two-way flow of value and the capabilities needed to make that happen, it's not necessarily something that's going to work for everyone. And so you have to ask yourself these questions to help you figure out whether you're ready for co-creation, if it's the right approach for you. So there's a whole like self-assessment tool that you're going to find in the toolkit that goes a lot deeper into this, and you've got many, many more questions that you would reflect on to help you figure this question out, whether you're ready or not. Step number 2 is identifying needs. As we said, you need to be clear on what your needs are on a strategic level in order to get the most out of the co-creation partnership. But you also need to be clear on what the same is for your potential co-creation partner. What are their needs strategically, so that you can make sure that the co-creation is adding value to them in a relevant way, right? So what are your long-term and your medium-term objectives and goals as an organization? Oftentimes, co-creation is fantastic in helping you address the barriers and obstacles to achieving those goals. So what are those barriers? What are those things that you lack that are mission critical that you can access through co-creation? Are you clear on how co-creation can be leveraged to help you address those mission critical gaps and barriers? At the same time, if you flip these questions or to the other side, and you ask yourself the same questions for your partner, then you'll be able to answer this final question here, which is what's the incentive for your co-creation partner. The incentive is often going to be the value that you can create for them to remove a strategic barrier for them to help them achieve their strategic goals and objectives, right? So if you can think basically about questions 1, 2, 3, but with your partner in mind, then you should be able to answer question number 4. Then identifying the right partner. What does this involve, right? So what activities should they be involved in? Where should they be on a geographically, where should they be located? What core values must you have in common between your organization and the organization that you want to partner with? What skills, resources, and capacity should they have for them to be able to constructively add value to the co-creation effort? So these are just a few questions that might help you make the right choice as far as who the right partner is. But there are many other questions that you'll find in the toolkit around this particular question. Making connections, right? There are the right ways to do it and the wrong ways to do it. Some questions that you want to ask yourself. One is your pitch. What is your pitch in one short sentence? Like, do you have a value proposition that you're able to present to a potential partner in one sentence very quickly that will get them interested, that will get them eager to discuss more and to engage with you? Who's the right contact at the organization? Not every person that you talk to is the right person. Who are the key decision makers? So you have to align yourself with people that can make decisions in order for you to get things done quickly. What's the right time to contact the organization? So you can think about time in many different contexts, right? So, is it the right time from a fiscal standpoint? Is it the right time of the year to be engaging the organization around a potential partnership? Is it the right time of the day to be engaging with your contact in the organization? Is the right time of the week? So just trying to understand the cycles around the organization and figuring out what the right time to bring such a conversation to the table is important. And you can often figure this out by talking to acquaintances of the organization, talking to other people that have been in touch with the organization before, and to just get some insight on how decisions are made and how the time factor plays in. How long does it take to make decisions? Again, something that you can figure out by doing your research and talking to people that have engaged with the organization. And there's a lot more as far as making connections that you find in the toolkit to help you approach this in the right way. Co-designing the project. There are a couple of very, very important elements that feed into the design of the co-creation project, right? So you've got, what are the goals, measurable goals and objectives of the co-creation? So while it's a long-term partnership, you need to be able to translate that into goals for the next 12 months, goals for the next 24 months. What are we trying to achieve? What does success look like? What are the key activities that are going to be involved in delivering on those goals for the next couple of months? And what role will each of the partners play? What resources will you bring to the table? What assets are you going to make available to make it possible to implement the activities? What are we bringing to the table? So very clear for each of the partners. This is an important question to answer. The other question that you need to be able to answer, again, on a tactical level, is what's the benefit for each of the partners, right? So be very, very clear. What benefits are you looking to get as partner A, as partner B, and ultimately what impact and what benefits are we looking to deliver to the target group, to the beneficiaries that that we're serving together. What's the budget and the plan for sustainability? Very practical questions that need to be answered. So in coming up with the core design of the project between the two partners, these are some of the key questions that need to be answered. And then finally, when you talk about core execution, core management, core evaluation, this is really the day-to-day practical, operational side of co-creation, right? So question number one, do you have a team that consists of members from both companies? So you need to have like an administrative team for the co-creation that is representative of both the organizations. So do you have such a team in place that's responsible for the day-to-day, and that has members from both organizations? Do you have a framework for meetings, how often you'll meet, what topics you'll discuss, and so on and so forth? Do you have a framework for your regular planning and goal setting, right? So either you're meeting every 6 months, or you're meeting every 12 months, or every 3 months, or whatever. There has got to be a time that you just step away from everything to reflect, how is everything going? How are we doing in terms of achieving the goals that we set, and what are the new goals that we want to be setting looking forward? What's the structure for accountability, right? Who do we report to? What do we include in those reports, and so on and so forth? How are decisions made? How is the project funded? How is communication going to be managed? What's the framework for monitoring, evaluation, and learning, and how will it be reported or communicated to stakeholders? So these are all practical questions that are involved in the day-to-day operation of the collaboration, right? And these are the questions that if you can get answers to, then you'll be in a really good place in as far as management and day-to-day running of the collaboration is concerned. So I'll just pause there. This is my last slide as far as the steps are concerned. We have just about 4 minutes left. I wish we had a bit more time. This could have potentially been a lot more engaging, but I hope that it still was valuable for you all and you're able to pick out some interesting insights. And we'll be sending you the toolkit that will help you to go a lot deeper into some of these questions and steps that we have gone over here. So yeah, that's my last slide. If you have any questions, please go ahead and ask them, and I'll try as much as I can to answer in the shortest time possible. Are there any, do you have any questions?
I think everybody is overwhelmed and excited and needs to digest the information. Well, it was indeed very rich presentation in terms of content and process, and it gives a lot of food for thought. That's what I would say. I usually ask a lot of questions myself, but then even in my case, I feel that I need to kind of go through it and reflect and maybe watch the recording once again. And it's very practical, very relevant, and I love particularly the examples which you gave. Those were totally fascinating. It just so inspirational that you wish like to start scanning the environment and seeking for partners and creating something together.
Yeah. All right, so so let's just say for my benefit, just to know, because we haven't unfortunately had as much opportunity to engage and converse as I'd hoped, I would just like to know on a scale of 1 to 5, where 5 is quite happy and 1 is not happy at all. Could you just type, and it's totally fine, by the way, don't worry about what the scale is, and you can be totally honest. If you could just put it in the chat, right? You know, if to what extent have your expectations been met coming into the discussion on co-creation and partnerships on a scale of 1 to 5? Yeah, right, very good. Nice. Very good. This is fantastic, guys. 4, 4, 5, 5, 5. This is good. This is I'm really happy that you found it interesting in spite of not having as much time to discuss and interact as I'd hoped, but it's still good to see that ultimately you found value in the session.
Yeah. No, thanks a lot, Nassir. It feels like going home, reflecting, thinking about some potential partnerships, co-creating something, and coming back to this session, to the second part, or like and rediscussing together. That's kind of the feeling I have right now. And but I think we can still all do this on a bilateral level with Nassir. I hope Nassir will have availability to discuss your particular questions. And so feel free to reach out to him. And we will also get back to you, to those who attended and to those who are registered, and share the whatever Nassir has to share. We already have quite interesting file with case studies, but also that toolkit which Nassir mentioned. So eventually we will share that. And in the meantime, thanks a lot to Nassir. It was really super inspiring, super interesting, and lots of food for thought. And thanks a lot to everyone for participating and being here with us.
Yeah. Fantastic. Very good. Well, thank you very much, everybody, and I wish you the best. Yeah, looking forward to engaging with you one-on-one where needed. Yeah, all the best.
Thanks a lot. Bye-bye, everyone. Bye-bye.
Yeah.
Of course, we will share the slides, of course, Martina. Yes, for sure. Bye-bye.